Hello and welcome to this week's Credential Chats from AACRAO. We have joining us one of our partners, or one of AACRAO's partners as part of the LER Accelerator, Niesha Taylor. She is the Director of Career Readiness at NACE. Niesha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for being here. I have loved the work on the accelerator and I look forward to chatting about it some more.
Absolutely. And before we jump into the accelerator, for any of our members and viewers who aren't familiar with NACE, maybe we should demystify the alphabet soup there and just let them know
Yes.
um, exactly what it is you all do for your members who also a lot of times are us.
Yes. So NACE stands for the National Association of Colleges and Employers. So you see very carefully in our name the connection between colleges and employers. We grew up out of serving directly career services leadership in campuses across the country, and have really now become kind of a bridge between higher ed and employment. So we have a lot of employer members as well, which is a very unique space. Um, and my position, which will relate to what we're going to talk about here today, has to do with something that NACE has become very known for, which is developing career competencies, really through some very sort of deep and focused research to make sure that when we're looking at what employers want in their early talent, that those are the competencies that we're sharing with higher education and helping to communicate to employers.
So while at a lot of our institutions, we, are doing learning for learning's sake for our learners who are also interested in seeking employment after they leave, NACE is one of the partners that's helping us understand the language of employers and what they're looking for so that we can identify in our own amazing teaching and learning that's already happening, the competencies the employers are looking for so we can equip our learners with ways to describe their learning achievement that matches them to their next job.
Exactly. And what you'll, first of all, it's really true that almost every student who's in your campuses wants to get a job afterwards, right? So it's really an alignment with their learning journey. And if you look at most general education learning outcomes and most institutional learning outcomes, they often align really well with NACE. Those are the critical, sort of durable skills that students are building over time. They're not surprising to most. It's things like critical thinking, communication, teamwork, right? These are things that our employers saying they're directly looking for and hiring for. And we're trying to make sure that colleges know there's a pretty clear alignment to what's happening in the classroom and this interest that employers have.
And I can totally validate that we have users on our campus at CU Boulder who are 100% when they're proposing micro-credentials, looking at the NACE competencies and aligning the learning outcomes to these competencies. And we're doing that in our micro-credentials and badges already. And so really excited to dig more into this. And so, where NACE is showing up in the same spaces as AACRAO, in addition to the Convergence Conference, which call for proposals just went live, depending on when you watch this video. And that's happening in November in Washington, D.C. of 2025. And registration is live as well. But it's also part of this LER Accelerator initiative. And, our viewers who've watched our other episodes, we dug into LERs, learning and employment records. Hope we're familiar with these as, not competing with the transcript. These are supplementary containers for transcripts and all other evidences that people should trust of our learning achievement. And so where is it that in this coalition of all of these higher ed organizations that NACE said, hey, we belong as part of this coalition with AACRAO and some of these other organizations that we're members of?
Yeah, I mean, it really goes back to kind of what we were talking about just moments ago, as we always see this alignment between these core learning values that a lot of higher education institutions have and the NACE competencies that we've confirmed with our employer members as well. And so we want to make sure that that alignment stays present in something like an LER. You have a student who's building and learning over time. It's critical that they also understand how those durable skills are building and really being shown over time. So we wanted to make sure that NACE is in that conversation. It's almost just like another way to show an alignment, between academics and the way that academics have traditionally been rolled out and thought of, and then the things that you're looking at in terms of developing for your career. So, to give an example, one of the things we've created is an assessment tool that shows proficiency in these different areas. And I think about it a lot because we've had discussions with AACNU, the American Association for Colleges and Universities. I try to say that really fast, um, about how our work aligns, our outcomes align. But on something like our rubric, we're not focused on how well you show critical thinking in a research paper. We're talking about the kinds of critical thinking you might do in the workplace, and we see that alignment. But we're asking you, how do you use data to make informed decisions or something like that? And that might be something you could really talk about in a job interview. So it's showing that alignment. It's that if you're going to be doing a learning employment record and a student has lots of different kinds of experience, we would like the connection over time of someone's experience to be anchored in these skills so that they can really tell their story well. They can kind of represent their like a variety of learning with real pride, including the kind of learning that happens on in a typical college experience.
And that just so rhymes with just the pattern and three seasons down, just all of our conversations is yes, this is technology. Yes, this is data. Yes, this is professional associations and employers. And like this is at the end of the day, really learner-centered stuff. And
Yes.
that, we're taking these things that feel really kind of subjective in a lot of times and difficult to measure,
Yeah.
like critical thinking and
Right.
leadership, and these durable skills that are what in a lot of times in personal and professional, advancement and mobility, the things that really matter fall in this durable skills kind of umbrella. And it's really important to have this language that you talked about of, making meaning that makes sense across different constituencies of what it all means.
Yeah, prior to working at NACE, I was at the New York Jobs CEO Council, which is an organization that works with 30 of the largest companies in New York City. And their focus is on hiring more low-income talent that is local to them. And I heard this was the first time coming out of higher ed for 20 plus years, like sitting straight in front of recruiters and employers, CEOs, talking about what they're looking for. And you hear these skills again and again, right? And they really were agnostic to how the student might have developed those things. It could be that you're talking about how you have to navigate the complicated situation where you're balancing school and caring for your younger siblings, or something that you're doing in your local community around, building a community event or something like that. But if you can talk about it related to what they want, which is some of that the ideas of critical thinking, decision making, follow through, like, the ability to show up and always like be excited. They always talked about the lean in, right? They want you to feel like excited and focused, interested in their work and what the company might be doing. So sharing mission, things like that. I saw how much elite the students that I was working with were usually in City University of New York, mostly community colleges. They had so many of these skills and didn't quite know how to connect them to the kind of language, follow through, and also really like the level of like pride in the knowledge that they have in these kinds of categories. So I think like anchoring those things, it just offers so many more students access to the right stories to really kind of get to that next level they want in their career.
And I am just so drinking the Kool-Aid here, and something that I'm reminded of that I heard about that might have been one of the conversations you were leading in New York with employers with an organization in Brooklyn called RealWorks and their Media Makers program was that not just communication, but in this case it was film studios and production studios. When if we hire a paid intern from New York City, do they know how to answer the phone when
Hmm.
somebody calls in a professional setting? That's like a granular, durable skill that is under communication, but you can also attach can-do statements that to actually, to use your words, tell that story
Yeah,
of how they, and to use your other words, to apply those skills, but in ways that are trusted and verifiable. It's not the learner saying, "Hey, trust me, I know how to answer a phone. I do it all the time." But
right.
it's a trust organization like CUNY saying, "Trust us. We've
I have the right
assessed them.
students for you. Yeah.
We have validated."
I'll give you a great example that is exactly what you just described. Um, the lead on our director of career services at LaGuardia Community College, Jessica Perez, Dr. Jessica Perez, she had a badging program when I was at LaGuardia, and she had the badge for communication connected to things that were happening in on-campus work. And students were often answering the phone, and that was their literal evidence in the badge, right? So you know how you could connect in an LER to literal evidence. You can click on and see how did they get this. You could see the program information and all they had to do, and literally watch this student answer the phone and how they navigated a conversation. So exactly that. Yes, it's like how to make it relevant and how to help employers trust the information, right, when they're getting in there.
And which I think goes to why registrars and enrollment management professionals want to be involved in this stuff, is they are learning records, even if they are not credit bearing or not on the transcript, and that evidence piece is, hopefully a really important thing that's not a compliancy thing to go in a folder that nobody's ever going to look at,
Right.
right? It's seizing the power of the digital nature of the credential and the metadata to double as a portfolio. And for anybody who's interested, I have a blog post about this. 199 people have clicked on it. I'll know
Yeah.
that somebody cares if I see it click over 200. But
Yeah.
I really think that I'm with you that evidence is a big part of the future on this stuff, and because it's a trust signal. And
Mhm.
the other thing I hear you describing, Nisha, is like this, not just potentiality, but confidence that's gonna happen, that the credentials are being operationalized, that they are being used, early for progress monitoring, goal setting, discovering where their interests and assets might take them, and later on, actually helping as a currency to serve as keys that open up doors of opportunity to them. That these credentials aren't just created and issued, that they actually get used.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way that I would trust the development of any of these things. But I do feel like at NACE, last week, I had a conversations with folks that I am working with in higher education to develop curriculum around our competencies. And then I met with a recruiter who is doing the same thing to recruit and also to run an internship program. And seeing how those things like happen across that divide, I really trust that these are true and important things for students to develop and pay attention to. So yes, it's happening. I will say, like before, I presented at AACNU with a group from the accelerator, and as I was heading into that presentation, I just started like looking more deeply at the literature around this, sort of trying to understand what the context is for this. And it feels like most definitely this is the direction of the future of higher education, to develop this kind of rich and digital record across different institutions that really is a little bit more learner centered. I think it's happening. And so, that it's part of the reason why like NACE wants to be at the table. It's like a critical place for us to understand, and really to be part of that conversation so that, as we were talking earlier, you said something like good humans, right? Like just trying to be good humans in the right places, trying to pay attention to like making sure quality experiences are what we're aiming for as we're developing, this kind of new system.
I mean, I just love how you have framed this, because I think as much as we talk about this LER stuff, this learning employment record ecosystem, there's this tipping point where all of a sudden it makes sense and it just seems so, common sense and like gonna change the world. And until then, it feels overwhelming and complicated and very confusing.
Yeah.
And I really think that, Nisha, you have just made this so comprehensible and accessible. I hope it's, really valuable to our members who see this. Thank you so much for spending the time with us on Credential Chats. Niesha Taylor, Director of Career Readiness at NACE.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. The pleasure has been all ours, and have a badge-worthy week, everybody. So long.
Bye.